I stood between them. Between two lifetimes. Between two men. One who had killed me out of love. One who had brought me back for love. And now, I had to choose. A war written in blood. The air crackled with tension. Lucian's eyes glowed a deep, unnatural blue, a smirk playing on his lips. "You remember now, don't you, Elena?" he whispered. My heart pounded. Yes. I did. I remembered the love. The betrayal. The pain. I remembered dying in Damien's arms. But there was one thing that I still didn't understand. Why did you kill me? I turned to Damien, my voice shaking. If you loved me, why? Damien's face darkened. For the first time, I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before. Guilt. Because you asked me to, he whispered. The truth at last. I had thought Lucian was the one who betrayed me. But the truth was, I had betrayed him. I saw it now, clear as day. I had been cursed. Bound to Lucian by an ancient spell. A soul-binding ritual meant to tie us together for eternity. A love I had never been able to escape. And I had wanted freedom. So I had turned to Damien. And I had begged him to kill me. It's the only way, I had whispered. Kill me before the spell binds me to him forever. I had chosen death over Lucian. And Damien. Damien had granted me my wish. Lucian's wrath. I should hate you, Lucian murmured, his voice like silk. For what you did to me. I shivered. I had died by another man's hands, to escape him. And yet, Lucian had still brought me back. He had still waited centuries for me to return. Why? I whispered. Why did you bring me back? Lucian's smile was slow, dangerous. Because no matter how many times you die, no matter how many times you run. His hand brushed my cheek. You will always be mine. The war begins. Damien snarled. Stay away from her, Lucian. Lucian only chuckled. You really don't get it, do you, brother? He said. I froze. Brother? I whispered. My blood ran cold. Lucian and Damien. They weren't just enemies. They were family. Lucian's grin widened. Oh, he didn't tell you? He turned to me, his gaze mocking. The man who killed you was my own blood. I took a shaky step back, my mind spinning. Damien was Lucian's brother? A war between brothers. And I had been the cause. The choice. Lucian took another step forward, his voice low. It's time to come home, Elena. Damien growled. She's not going anywhere with you. I looked at them both. Two men. Two souls tied to me by fate. One had killed me. One had saved me. But in the end, they had both destroyed me. I exhaled shakily. And then, I turned my back on them both. I don't belong to either of you. Lucian's face darkened. Damien's eyes widened. But before they could react, I ran. Into the darkness. Into the unknown. Into a future where I chose myself. I ran. Through the trees. Through the darkness. Through the memories that refused to let me go. But no matter how far I ran, I knew they would find me. The hunt begins. I didn't know where I was going. Only that I had to get away. Away from Lucian. Away from Damien. Away from the curse that had bound me to them for centuries. But deep down, I knew. I could never truly escape them. Because I wasn't just running from them. I was running from who I used to be. And then, I heard it. A sound so soft, so chilling. Footsteps. Right behind me. The shadow in the dark. I gasped, turning sharply, nothing. But I could feel it. Someone was there. Watching. Waiting. A new fear settled in my bones. Because this time, it wasn't Lucian. And it wasn't Damien. This was something else. Something darker. Something ancient. The forgotten enemy. In the past, it had always been Lucian and Damien fighting over me. But I had forgotten. There was someone else. Someone who had watched from the darkness. Someone who had waited for this very moment. And now, as I ran through the forest, that presence was finally closing in. Then, a whisper in my ear. "Did you really think they were your biggest threat, little one?" I froze. My blood turned to ice. And before I could scream, everything went black. The awakening. I gasped for air, my body trembling. I wasn't in the forest anymore. I was somewhere else. Somewhere ancient. Somewhere I had been before. The walls were covered in old symbols, glowing faintly in the dim candlelight. And in front of me, a throne. And sitting upon it, him. His presence was suffocating, his golden eyes glowing in the dark. I knew him. But I had erased him from my memory. He tilted his head, watching me with a cruel smile. "Welcome back, Elena. The first vampire." I barely managed to whisper. "No, it's not possible." But it was. Because sitting in front of me was not just any vampire. He was the first. The one who had created Lucian. The one who had cursed me in the first place. The one even Lucian feared. His name was Dorian. And he had just taken me prisoner. I was trapped. Not by chains. Not by walls. But by fate. I had spent lifetimes running from Lucian. I had died at the hands of Damien. But none of it mattered anymore. Because now, I belonged to him. Dorian's game. The air felt heavy. Like the weight of centuries pressed against my skin. Dorian sat on his throne, his golden eyes studying me like I was something to be devoured. "It's been a long time, my little princess," he murmured. I swallowed hard. "I'm not your princess." His smirk widened. "Oh, but you were. A long, long time ago." Then, images flooded my mind. A forgotten life. I gasped. I wasn't just his prisoner. I had once been his queen. Dorian's voice echoed in my head. "You weren't just a vampire, Elena. You were the first. You were mine." The curse revealed. I shook my head. No. No, that's not possible. I was never. Dorian laughed. "Oh, you were. Before Lucian. Before Damien. Before everything." His eyes darkened. "You were my wife. And you betrayed me." I staggered back. "No." Dorian stood from his throne, stepping toward me, his voice soft but dangerous. "You tried to escape me. You thought you could love another." His gaze burned into me. "So I cursed you, my love. To be reborn. Again and again. But never to remember me, until now." Lucian and Damien's arrival. They had felt it. The moment Dorian awakened my memories, they had known. Lucian's hands curled into fists. "We have to get her out of there." Damien growled. "No. We have to kill him first." But they were too late. Because inside, I wasn't the same anymore. I was remembering who I truly was. And for the first time in centuries, I wasn't afraid. I thought I was free. I thought I had escaped fate. But the truth was cruel. I was never meant to leave him. Not Lucian. Not Damien. But Dorian. The first vampire. The one I once loved. The one I had betrayed. And now, he had finally come to claim me. The Queen awakens. I could feel it now. The past clawing at me, dragging me down, forcing me to remember. Lucian. Damien. The war between them. None of it had mattered. Because before them, there was only Dorian. A love that started it all. I had once been his queen. Not just any vampire. The first. The strongest. And I had loved him. But love had turned to fear. Because Dorian was not just powerful. He was merciless. I saw it now. The moment I had made my choice. The moment I had betrayed him. I had gone to Lucian. Begged him to protect me. And in return, I had started a war. And when Dorian had discovered my betrayal, he had cursed me. To be reborn. Again and again. To live. To suffer. To die. But never to remember. Until now. Lucian and Damien's desperation. Lucian clenched his jaw. She's remembering. Damien's fists tightened. Then we have to stop it. Lucian turned to him, his voice sharp. And what if she doesn't want to be saved? Damien froze. Because that was the truth neither of them wanted to face. What if Elena chose Dorian? The final choice. He had waited centuries for me. Endured my deaths. Endured my betrayals. And yet, here he was. Still calling me his queen. Dorian stepped closer. It doesn't matter how many times you run, Elena, he whispered. You will always come back to me. I looked at him. At the man who had once owned my soul. At the monster I had once loved. Then, I took his hand. Lucian and Damien burst through the doors. Only to see me standing beside Dorian. Their eyes widened in horror. Elena, Lucian breathed. But I only stared at them. Because for the first time in centuries, I had finally chosen. For centuries, I had run from my past. From the truth. From him. But the past had finally caught up with me. And this time, I wasn't running anymore. The aftermath of her choice. The silence was heavy. Lucian's face was unreadable. Damien's hands curled into fists. Neither of them expected this. Neither of them thought I would choose him. And maybe, neither did I. Dorian smirked, his voice smooth. It's over, boys. She's finally home. Betrayal in their eyes. Elena, Lucian murmured. What have you done? My lips parted, but no words came out. How could I explain it? How could I make them understand? The memories. The truth. The feeling that this was right. Damien laughed coldly. You're lying to yourself, he spat. This isn't who you are. I looked at him. At the man who had once killed me. At the man who had sworn to protect me. I remember now, I whispered. I remember everything. And that was the worst part. Because now, I didn't know which version of myself was real. Lucian's final warning. I spent centuries fighting for you, Elena. His eyes searched mine, desperate. And you're telling me that none of it mattered? I swallowed hard. It did, I admitted. But, it doesn't change what came before. Lucian's jaw clenched. Then, his voice turned cold. Then you've made your choice. He took a step back. And so have we. The war begins. I could feel it. The shift in the air. The moment everything broke. Damien's eyes burned with rage. If you stand with him, then you stand against us. Dorian laughed. So dramatic, as always. But very well. Let's end this. Then. Chaos. Lucian lunged forward, sword drawn. Damien's shadows erupted. Dorian smirked. And before I could react, the battle began. Elena's choice tested. I had thought choosing was the hardest part. I was wrong. Because now, I had to live with it. I had to fight. For him. For them. For myself. And for the first time, I didn't know which side I truly belonged to. And then, Lucian's sword came straight for Dorian's heart. And I moved to stop him. I thought choosing was the hardest part. But I was wrong. Because now, I had to live with it. The clash of titans. My breath caught. I moved, before I even understood why. Dorian's eyes widened. Lucian's blade slashed through the air. And then, clang. My own blade met his. Sparks flew as steel collided against steel. Lucian's gaze snapped to mine, betrayal flashing in his eyes. Elena. Damien stopped mid-attack, his shadows curling around him. I stood between them. Between war and peace. Between my past and my future. Between the man who saved me. And the man I once loved. Lucian's fury. Move. I held my ground. Lucian. Move. His voice boomed through the hall, shaking the very air around us. His hands trembled around the hilt of his sword. His eyes burned with rage, and something else. Something close to heartbreak. I fought for you, he hissed. I died for you. And now you. His voice broke. I swallowed hard. It's not that simple. His jaw clenched. It is. His eyes flashed. You either stand with him. He lifted his blade once more. Or you stand with me. Dorian's dark truth. Go on, Elena, he murmured. Tell them. I turned to him, confused. Tell them what? Dorian's gaze held mine. Tell them what you remember. Something tightened in my chest. Because I did remember. More than I wanted to. More than I should. And for the first time, I realized the truth. The lies of the past. I had always believed I was the victim. That Dorian had been the villain. That I had been running from a monster. But what if I had been wrong? What if the monster had never been him? What if it had been me? Damien's realization. Elena, he murmured. What did you do? I opened my mouth. But the words stuck in my throat. Because I saw it now. I saw everything. I hadn't just betrayed Dorian. I had killed him. The forgotten murder. I gasped. I had been the one to strike first. I had loved him. And then, I had ended him. Dorian's voice pulled me back to the present. Now you understand, he whispered. Lucian and Damien stared at me. Waiting. Expecting me to deny it. To lie. But because I remembered. And I knew. I wasn't the person they thought I was. The beginning of the end. Lucian exhaled slowly. Then, he lowered his sword. Then it's true, he whispered. Damien ran a hand through his hair, his face unreadable. So, what now? I looked at them. At Dorian. At the war waiting to explode around us. At the centuries of lies and blood tangled between us all. And for the first time in my immortal life, I didn't know the answer. The truth was out. I was not a victim. I was not innocent. I was the one who started this war. And now, I would have to end it. A silence before the storm. I had been running from a lie. Believing that Dorian had been the villain. That I had been the betrayed. But the truth? I was the one who had stabbed him first. Lucian exhaled, breaking the silence. I knew there was something missing. His gaze darkened. I just never thought you were the missing piece. Damien let out a bitter laugh. And what now? Do we pretend this never happened? He turned to Dorian. Do you still want revenge? Dorian's eyes gleamed. Revenge, he murmured. I've already won. The unraveling of Lucian. For centuries, he had built his life around saving me, protecting me. And now? Everything he thought he knew was a lie. His jaw tightened. So what am I supposed to do now, Elena? His voice was sharp, cutting through the air. What do I fight for if you were the villain all along? I flinched. Lucian, No. His eyes burned into mine. You don't get to apologize. Then, his voice dropped to a whisper. You don't get to break me twice. Damien's choice. So, what? He mused. We're just supposed to stand here while everything falls apart? His eyes flickered to Dorian. I don't trust you. I never will. Dorian smirked. Smart man. But, Damien continued, if Elena's past is what really started this, then there's only one way to finish it. Lucian frowned. What are you saying? Damien looked at me. I'm saying it's time to end this war. The war begins. The world was on the edge. Centuries of war, fueled by a single lie. And now, it would all burn. Lucian turned back to me. If you're really done running, Elena. He stepped closer, his golden eyes filled with something between love and pain. Then prove it. Damien sighed, rolling his shoulders. We end this. Tonight. Dorian chuckled. Ah, how dramatic. His eyes gleamed as he stepped forward. Very well, then. Let's give the world the war it's been waiting for. Elena's last stand. Cut to Elena, her face filled with determination, shadows swirling around her. I had started this. I would finish it. No more running. No more lies. Just the truth, and the consequences. I lifted my sword. And whispered the words that would change everything. Let's end this. This war began with a lie. It ends with the truth. No more running. No more regrets. Tonight, I decide my fate. The war begins. The air was thick with tension. Lucian stood at the front, his golden eyes locked onto me. Damien's shadows curled around him like a storm. And Dorian? Dorian was smiling. Well, he murmured, shall we begin? Lucian lifted his sword. For the kingdom, he roared. Damien's voice followed, sharp and commanding. For vengeance. Dorian? He simply whispered, for her. Then. Chaos. The Battle of Kings. The war had begun. Lucian charged at Dorian, their swords colliding in a shower of sparks. Damien vanished into his shadows, cutting through enemy lines, like a phantom. And me? I stood frozen. Watching them fight. Watching them bleed. Because of me. I had thought I was ready. I had thought I knew what I wanted. But as I looked at them, at Lucian, Damien, Dorian, I realized the truth. I didn't want victory. I wanted peace. Elena's choice. I had one chance. One choice that could end this war. So I took it. I stepped forward. Lifted my blade. And plunged it into the ground. The world trembles. The fighting stopped. Everyone turned. Lucian. Damien. Dorian. All eyes were on me. I lifted my head, my voice echoing through the night. This war ends now. No more blood. No more revenge. I won't let the past control me anymore. I turned to Lucian. I loved you. I turned to Damien. I trusted you. I turned to Dorian. I betrayed you. I looked at all of them. I won't let the past decide our future. Then, I raised my arms. And released everything. The final spell. A bright light filled the battlefield. A new beginning. The warriors collapsed to their knees, their weapons falling from their hands. The anger, the rage, the curse that bound us. It was gone. Dorian let out a slow breath. Damien stepped back, his shadows fading. And Lucian? Lucian fell to his knees, looking up at me with something close to awe. A new dawn. The war was over. The kingdom would heal. The past would stay where it belonged. And me? I had finally found myself. Lucian approached me. I never wanted to lose you, he murmured. I smiled sadly. You never did. Damien sighed. Well, this is anticlimactic. Dorian chuckled. And yet, satisfying. I looked at them, at all of them. And I knew. This wasn't just my story. It was ours. And it wasn't the end. It was just the beginning.